It's time for another LA Kings fan feedback show. We continue to talk about the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, the progress of Quinton Byfield, Gabe Vilardi's comments about LA, and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you were enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. It is time for another LA Kings fan feedback show. We do these every Friday. Got a lot of questions and comments to get to, so as usual, we will get right in them. And as usual, we will start with the emails. And the first comes from Rich in San Pedro, who literally lives like 2 or 3 blocks away from me. And he says, hope all is well. Let's harp on the Quinton Byfield saga a little bit more. Here's my take. Let's be careful what we wish for, Kings fans. I think Kings fans see Tim Stützle as a benchmark for QB, since we could have had Stützle at number 2 instead of Quinton Byfield. Let's see the career stats so far. For Stützle, 73 goals, 104 assists in 210 games. For Byfield, 8 goals, 25 assists in 99 games. Do we really need QB to be putting up Stützle numbers this coming season? In my opinion, not yet. Isn't QB going into the final year of his entry-level contract? If QB comes out of the gates and gives Stützle numbers, then there is no way we can afford him next year, and the Kings would be in the same situation where we would lose him, as if he wants Stützle type of a contract for $8+ million a year. If he comes out and has an okay year, then the Kings can afford a bridge contract. Kings will need to make a decision on Roy, Lizotte, Arvidsson, Grundstrom, Kaliev, and Jared Anderson-Dolan, and still need to find a way to sign 2 goalies next year. Cap friendly is not looking very friendly for next year, so maybe it's okay to be patient with QB for 1 more year. Thanks, Eddie, and go Kings, go. Thanks for the email, Rich. I would say my first reaction is you don't have to worry about Quinton Byfield putting up 20 goals and 40 points next season. I just don't see that happening. You're arguing maybe we should be thankful for him to not turn into Tim Stützle for next season because you think we might not be able to afford him. I would say even if let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say he does explode and score 20 plus goals and get close to 50 points. That would be, I think we would all be amazed and thrilled by that. Even if that happens, he's not going to demand $8 million a year and some huge contract extension. Yes, you're right. He is going into the final season of his entry-level contract. But as we saw with Gabe Vilardi, who had his sort of breakout season this past year, that doesn't translate into just, a team offering that player, a huge contract. I think if Quinton Byfield does have a really, really breakout season and puts up numbers, the Kings are still going to say, that was great. We're so excited. This is awesome. But we need to see more before we really commit to you. And Gabe Vilardi, coming off that season, he got a 2-year deal worth $3.5 million per season from the Winnipeg Jets. So even him kind of coming off his quote unquote breakout season, and even the Jets being optimistic that this is what they're going to see more from him going forward, and he's still a young player, they weren't committed to him big time. So like I said, I don't think that's going to happen with Quinton Byfield as far as him having a big breakout year. If it does, great. But if it does, I'm not too worried that he's going to be the reason why the Kings are not going to be able to re-sign some key players for next season. I think that you talked about the bridge deal. I think that's what would happen. There would be kind of okay, that was great. Here's what we're offering. It's a raise for sure, but we need to see it again. And if we do see it again, then we're willing to commit for more term and more money and more years and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't think that that's going to be a big consideration. And I don't think that's a big, again, fear. I think slow improvement from Quinton Byfield, another step is what we can realistically expect. But I think Quinton Byfield is still a couple years away from really turning into something where we're like, okay, it was worth the wait. It was worth the patience. I don't think we're going to see it this year, to be honest with you. You also mentioned some of the players that are going to be free agents next season. The keys we've talked about a little bit before. Victor Arvidsson, Matt Roy are probably the two keys, other than, of course, the goaltenders. You do have Quinton Byfield and Arthur Kaliyev both coming off their rookie deals. They'll be restricted free agents. Everyone else, Lizotte, Grundstrom, Jared Anderson, Dolan, those are guys that can be replaced if necessary. And the Kings will get a little bit of cap relief next year when Andre Kopitar's contract goes from $10 million a year to $7 million a year. Our next email comes from David. He's in Las Vegas. He says, I've been meaning to write for a while and I haven't been able to until today, so I've got some thoughts. I'm a quarter season ticket holder, and everydayer, and I try to go as often as I can to the games. It has its benefits. Last year, I got to ride on the Zamboni for the first time. He says, number one, I rooted for Florida, and now the Golden Knights fans are going to be super obnoxious after they won the Cup. Everyone in Vegas is trying to cash in on them everywhere I go. I saw maybe 5 minutes of the Stanley Cup playoffs after Florida lost the first game. Funny, after 20-plus years, Florida has one Stanley Cup victory. Vegas is spoiled. The Kings used to show the banners of both of our Cup wins when we played them, and now that dig has lost some momentum. Number two, Gabe Vilardi was not wrong about LA as a whole, not caring about the team. We do have passionate fans, but our media coverage is pitiful. The LA Times dropped their coverage years ago and now relies on the Associated Press, which is embarrassing. They only cover the hockey when it's convenient for them. Number three, I do not feel that LA was fleeced in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. We had to free up roster space to allow the newer draft picks a shot at making the team. Giving him up was a necessary component for the future advancement of the prospects. Where do we expect Fagemo, Turcotte, Pinelli, etc. If there are no spots? Unfortunately, that also cost us Iafallo and Kupari. If Iafallo struggled, then LA would hear about it from fans about how overpaid he was, that he was taking up a spot, and that he needed to be traded. Now Vilardi will be with the Jets, or now Vilardi will be the Jets' problem in 2 years if he chooses not to re-sign there, and they'll have to go through the same thing Calgary just went through. Number four, Dursey had to go. How many times were people on the edge because of his play? Did it suck having to also send that pick in the PLD trade? Sure, but it was better to trade him away for something than losing a player to waivers. I wish him and all the previous members well, as long as they're not playing for the Vegas Golden Knights. Finally, I started going to games when I could start to afford them. When Potvin was in LA, I'm sure I still have a Felix the Cat patch somewhere in my garage. So lots of thoughts there from David. Unfortunately, he's in Las Vegas and has to live amongst the Golden Knights fans. But David, I commend you for not switching over, as a lot of Vegas was a pretty strong LA Kings base as far as fans. But then the Vegas Golden Knights came in and a lot of them switched over to the Golden Knights. So, which I understand. But I know you said that Vegas Golden Knights fans are now going to be obnoxious because they won the Cup. Is it possible for them to be more obnoxious than they already were? They were pretty obnoxious already. And yes, they are spoiled. And I think hopefully they would admit that themselves. I do have to completely agree with you about the media coverage in LA. But I think the LA Times thing, that was kind of more of a newspaper thing. Newspapers are dying in this country. The New York Times recently got rid of their entire sports department, and they're all using sports stories from The Athletic, which I guess their company owns or something. So that's a newspaper thing as far as the Times goes. But you're right. The media coverage for hockey in Los Angeles is pretty pathetic, which is good for people like me who, get this out there for you guys. And it's something that hockey fans I know are thirsty for. As far as the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, I continue to think it was a good deal for both teams. LA got the best player in the deal. As you said, there are other players ready to move in and take spots of some of the players that moved out. And I think it was a good pickup for Winnipeg. I think they got good value for a player they knew that they needed to ship out anyway. This comes from Jason. He is in Redondo Beach. He says, I'm an everydayer, and I've been listening for 1.5 to 2 years. So I think that's how long this show has existed. First with Sarah Anfabato as host, and now with me. So you've apparently been listening since the beginning of this show. He says, congrats on your 1 year anniversary. You've been killing it. We met once at a Kings game where you gave me a Locked On LA Kings hat. I remember that. He says, I wear it to all my beer league hockey games. We also play each other on Sunday at the Skating Edge rink. So I have a few questions. If you could answer a couple. Number one, where are you playing on Sunday? I'm a beer league hockey player. Where are you playing on Saturday? He asked. I play Friday, Saturday at Lakewood, the rinks at Lakewood, right next to the Long Beach Airport, and then I play on Sunday, as you know, at the Skating Edge in Harbor City. He says, number two, when Drew and Kopi got their statues, what did you think that they would do, and what would you do? I'd like it to be incorporated with Dustin Brown's statue. See you Sunday, and maybe we can get a picture together. First, yes, we can definitely make that happen. The statue things. I know that they are upgrading Crypto.com Arena over the next couple of years. And I know they're getting rid of that street that is in between LA Live and Crypto.com Arena. I think it's called Chick Hearn Court. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do with that area. I think it would be really cool to kind of, I don't know if you could turn it into kind of a park in some ways, where you get rid of that street and then you fill it in and you can put different things there. I actually would like to see them move some of the statues. Maybe they could have kind of a Hall of Fame plaza area to put all kind of the statues in a kind of a better location. They're all kind of crammed together in front of that side of Crypto.com Arena, and it's getting a little crowded, frankly. And I've been to Philadelphia before. They have all of their three stadium / arenas together, and they all share a giant parking lot, and they've got these huge sports bars there and everything else, and they've got statues kind of lining the walkways where you can go to all the different places. There's the Eagle Stadium, Lincoln Financial Field. There's the baseball stadium, Citizens Bank Park, I think, for the Phillies, and then the arena for the Flyers and 76ers is there as well. I can't remember the name of that offhand, but anyway, they're all kind of connected, and I think maybe there's a smaller version of that could kind of take place between LA Live and Crypto.com Arena, and turn that into something, where people can hang out, and maybe the statues could kind of go in that area. I don't know, just my thoughts. But I like the sentiment, what you're saying, that Kopitar and Quick statues should somewhere be around Dustin Brown's statue. But who knows? I think it's just where they have room for it. We've got a lot more to talk about. Got a few emails and a tweet that I want to get to as well. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, take your first swings at Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount back in a bonus bet. That is $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in a bonus bet, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to over/under to who you think might hit the first home run. It's all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There is no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in a bonus bet. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Let's get to a tweet that we got over at Locked on LA Kings, or X, or whatever they're calling it these days. This comes from Theresa Allen. She is at Theresa L. Allen on Twitter. She says, I've been a hockey fan since I was 4 years old, since my father was born and raised in Winnipeg. Hockey rules in Canada. It does not in Los Angeles. I understand exactly what Gabe Vilardi was talking about. It's a religion there. Americans need to get over themselves, and I am an American. I'm not sure what you mean by we need to get over ourselves. But I will say, in that whole Gabe Vilardi thing where he said in a conference call, in LA, they're not big hockey fans, obviously, was the quote. And I'm just pushing back on the idea that if you are a fan or a fan base from place X, that you are a better fan or a fan base than place Y because of where you are on a map, because you're in the Northeast in the United States, because you're in Minnesota, because you're in Canada. That somehow makes you a better or more passionate hockey fan than someone in Los Angeles, Vegas, Dallas, Tampa Bay, whatever. I certainly am not ignorant to the fact that Canada is covered. The sport of hockey is covered in Canada much more than it is in the United States. Obviously, it's their national pastime. It's part of their culture. It's where the game was born. I get all that. But again, I'm just pushing back on the idea that if you are from a certain area, it makes you a better fan. Like there are people in the South that they feel like they're better college football fans than you are because it's a religion down there. Well, there's still passionate football fans everywhere. Maybe on the whole, yeah, it's more passionate there in that area. But again, I don't like the idea. And look, I'm coming from a guy who was born in Hawaii and raised in California. I believe my passion for hockey is just as deep and as big as someone born in Toronto. I get that I didn't grow up with it from day one like you did. I get that I didn't play it on an ice rink in my backyard, but I'm just saying I believe my passion for the sport is just as valid and as just as legitimate as someone who was born in a place where it's on the whole the game is more covered and things like that. That's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. I thank you for the tweet. This comes from Don L. He is in North Hollywood Beach. I didn't know there was a North Hollywood Beach. Maybe I read that wrong. He says, regular watcher here. Well, Don, since you are about to correct me on something, let me correct you on something. Don, you are not a regular watcher. You're an everydayer. He says, about Samuel Fagemo. Before I discuss the player, I really think we need to get his name right once and for all. I've heard some media people in the Kings organization say it correctly, at least some of the time. These include Jared Stoll, Patrick O'Neill, Carlin Baith, and Jesse Cohen. I'm certain because I have a friend from Sweden who told me how to pronounce it, that it's pronounced Fagemo with the accent on the first syllable. The A is pronounced like an O in the words jolly and folly. A Swedish person with that European lilt in their accent might say Fagemo, but according to my friend, an American would typically say Fagemo. If you're still doubtful, try to get a Swedish guest on your show and ask them. Anyway, Samuel Fagemo, if he comes really primed to make the club this year, has a real great camp and an exhibition season, could end up being a more significant factor for the team than most fans realize. Of course, it's up to him to deliver the goods, but I'm looking at him to grab a fourth line right wing spot with Lazat and perhaps fellow Swede Grundstrom or Jared Anderson-Dolan on the left side. He's got two big things going for him. If he plays well enough to please the coaches, number one, he's a right shot, making him one of only 3 right shots among our 14 group of forwards. And one of those is Trevor Lewis, a pure defensive and PK guy who's not going to be a big factor as a shooter for the Kings. Also, Fagemo is especially effective on the power play where he can score from a few different spots. The power play affords him the offensive freedom to let his hair down, so to speak, and be more creative and dangerous. His right shot, if he makes the club, completes our second power play unit. He's got a smooth, easy release on his shot. He likes a one-time or two. He's one of those guys who gets something like half of his total offense on the power play. In addition, Fagemo is good at shootouts where he has a smooth release, or his smooth release comes in handy. He won 2 or 3 games for the Reign this past season on shootout goals. At even strength, Fagemo plays defense first style, suitable for a bottom 6 checking role, and saves his offense strictly for the occasional counterattack when doable. Due to his good hockey sense and skating and a solid work ethic, the Reign also used him on the PK at times this past season. I've heard it said that he plays the right way in coach's eyes. He currently is listed as in the hockey database at 6 foot, 200 pounds. While he's not huge, he is not at all a small forward. If Fagemo falters, then all bets are off. But if he has a great camp and exhibition, he could be off to a very nice rookie season, 15 plus goals and 30-ish points. Half of that on the power play. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible, in my opinion, more possible than you think. All right, Don, thank you for that. Good take. I'm glad you brought this up because I do pride myself on the pronunciation of names. That said, I have to admit that this player has been a bit of an issue. When the Kings drafted him, and you can go see this on YouTube, Mark Yannetti, the director of amateur scouting, said that the Kings select Samuel Fagemo. Now, if you watch the Swedish highlights of him, it's Fagemo. If you watch a video of his first NHL goal, this is my favorite, Alex Faust said Fagemo on the goal, and then Jim Fox, in analyzing the goal, called him Fagemo. I texted Jared Shaffrin, who was a guest on the show this week. He is the manager of communications and content for the Reign. He texted me back that it's pronounced Fagemo, with the emphasis on the second syllable, Fagemo. I floated back and forth on this, and I need to pick one and stick with it, and I'm still not exactly sure what I'm going to do. As for his game, I think he's a bit of a dark horse to get on that fourth line. The Kings did show him a vote of confidence last season when Victor Arvidsson was hurt by giving him they gave him a good hard look kind of in the preseason. I think that was a good sign for him. I do think you're right. I do think he plays the game the right way. And I know that's big in Todd McClellan's book. But the fourth line, I think you've got Blake Lizotte at center. I think that's pretty much in stone. And I got to believe Trevor Lewis is going to get one of those winger spots. With the emphasis on improving the penalty kill, I think they want Trevor Lewis in the lineup, at least if not more of the kind of the gritty game that he brings. So that leaves a spot for Jared Anderson-Dolan, Carl Grundstrom, maybe Alex Turcotte, and then you've got Samuel Fagemo. So, I think he's a guy definitely to keep an eye on, but I would say he's a little bit of a dark horse to make the team for this year on that fourth line. We again are going to get some more emails for you, and we've got the YouTube comments to get to you in a moment here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, check out Locked on NHL to stay up to date on everything going on around the National Hockey League. There is still signings going on. There are arbitration hearings going on. So there's still always news year round, and this show is still giving you a show Monday through Friday. That is Locked on NHL. Check it out to keep up to date on everything going around the National Hockey League. Locked on NHL on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Let's get into some of the YouTube comments on all the trades and signings made by the Kings this offseason. This comes from Ricky Hazel 1030. He says, LA really didn't move any player that was an expendable asset management-wise. I do feel it was a bit of mismanagement to the extent that 5 really solid NHL players, some with an extremely high potential, and 3 second-round picks for 2 really good players, 1 NHL player and a guy who might be in the ECHL. When taken on the whole, the loss of depth might be bigger than the gain in skill. Taken individually, the Peterson trade wasn't really bad considering what it usually costs to unload a bad contract. 2 seconds, an NHL D-man without a roster spot who will likely be a top-tier player in Philadelphia, ironically, and some cap space isn't much to move, almost $6 million in cap space, used for Gavrikov, so win. The Jersey trade is a Rob Blake trade where you're not disappointed, but still a little underwhelming with the return. The PLD trade is a high-risk trade. Blake acquired a very good player who has potential to be a point-per-game player and should be playing with Fiala, but giving up Vilardi, who has point-per-game potential, AI, who is not only fantastic defensively, but very underrated offensively. Pretty sure he's been at or around 50% pace over 82 games the last 3 or 4 seasons. Kupari, who is really due for a breakout season. He definitely got better as time went on, especially on the back end. And that second in the Jersey trade, all of that, if it goes the Jets' way, could make it a major loss for Blake if for whatever reason it doesn't work out with PLD. I have panned the trade, but I'm over it. When I look at the roster, LA traded 5 really solid players and are probably a better team. Yeah, I think obviously this was in response to the episode that we had on Monday where we talked about all the offseason moves, kind of looking at them as a whole and how the roster is kind of taken shape for this coming season. I don't think there's any doubt the Kings had to give to get, but I don't think that any of the players that we lost were players that we obviously can't live without. And we'll see what Gabe Vilardi turns into. I like Alex Iafallo as a good all-around solid player, but again, I don't think he's irreplaceable. I think the Kings did get a little bit less effective defensively as far as what it looks like at the moment. But I think on the whole, the Kings are about team defense. I think losing a couple of pieces, I think you can fill those pieces in going forward. The jury is still out on Rasmus Kupari. He's still a young guy, and it's not fair to judge him at this point. But we'll see. I'm not convinced he's going to really blossom into, a top 6 forward in any sense. He's a bottom 6 forward, I think for sure. So we'll see. But I think again, overall, I think the Kings improved in an area where they felt they needed to improve to take the next step, and I think the other spots that they are going to need to fill in, I think they feel like they've got the pieces in the organization to be able to fill in those spots. But the depth is going to be an issue. Fingers crossed the Kings stay healthy for next season. This on the possibility of Eric Portillo being the future in net for the LA Kings. This comes from Aquaman 01. He says, if Eric Portillo has a great season for the Reign, do the Kings give him a shot next year for a starting role, or at least a 1B role, considering we have no one signed past this season in goal? I would say that I would doubt it. He would have to have one hell of a season for the Kings to consider him the number one goalie for next year. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, he just absolutely dominates the AHL. It's still a big jump from the AHL to the NHL. But again, if he does have this over-the-top crazy season, I think the Kings might consider him as the number one goalie with a veteran backup in case he's not ready. But if he isn't ready, I don't think there's any way he would be a 1B type of a goaltender for the Kings. I think they would still say, okay, you've shown a lot of promise. We've given you a taste of the NHL. It didn't work out. Back to the AHL you go to get more seasoning. We're not going to have you sitting on the bench watching someone else play when you need to get reps. You're still young. I think there's, again, there's a very small chance that he could just have this unbelievable season and be considered the number one goalie next year. I just think that's kind of far-fetched. But if he does, and then it doesn't really work out, there's no way they would leave him as the second goalie. They would put him back in the AHL and let him get more playing time and continue to develop. This comment on the YouTube was about the Kings' defensive pairings for next season, talking about the third pairing. We talked about earlier about the fourth line for the Kings and the competition that's there, because the first three lines are pretty much set. Also, the same thing goes for the top two defensive pairings for the Kings, but there is a bit of a debate and maybe a battle for that third pairing role, and see who's going to be there. This comes from Wrong Beach 35. He says, put Andreas England with Brandt Clark on the third pairing. Short and sweet. I would be very surprised if Tobias Bjornfoot is not on the left side on that third pairing. Now, it depends on what the Kings feel they need, because Andreas England is a bigger, more physical guy. If they feel like they need someone to have a more physical role on the blue line, then I could see him getting the nod. But Tobias Bjornfoot, they spent a first-round pick on him. He's not as big and physical as Andreas England, but he's got more NHL playing time. I think he can do the job defensively just as well, and neither one of them give you much offensively. I just think the investment they've made in Bjornfoot, I think it's his job to lose. So we'll see what happens. And finally, we got this from Frank Easy 6798. I had talked about the Kings had released their promotional schedule, the giveaway nights and all that kind of stuff. He says, how early do you generally have to show up to acquire the promo swag? Well, if it's something that they're giving out, and you'll have to check the details, but if it's something they're giving out to all fans in attendance, then you don't have to show up early at all, because they pass those out as you're leaving the game. If it's something for like the first 5,000 fans, something like that, if you show up before the gates open, you're going to get the item, the hat, the bobblehead, whatever it is. So as long as you show up before the gates open, there's not usually a mass of people waiting to get it. It is LA, right? We like to show up right around face-off, maybe even a little bit later. So if you show up when the gates open, I think it's an hour to an hour and a half before the puck drops that they open the gates. If you show up before then, you're going to get whatever they're giving away. If it's one of those things where it's for the first blank 1,000 fans. So there you go. Thank you to everyone who took the time to write an email or to comment on the YouTube episodes. Obviously, this show is literally not possible without your feedback. So appreciate that. We'll do it again next Friday. The email address, which you can send an email to at any time, is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can also post your comments on the YouTube channels as always. For you everydayers, obviously, we're going to do this all again next week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday, we'll have a special feature. Wednesday, hopefully, we'll have a special guest. And then Friday, we'll have the fan feedback show again. Thank you guys for sticking with the show during this slowdown period in the NHL. Like I said, in about a month, we'll get right back into the swing of things, giving you a show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. If you want to stay connected with the show, we would love for you to follow us on Twitter or X or whatever it is, and Instagram. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.